Yes.
Oh, yes, good point. Thanks.
Hold on a second. We need to get the corporate.
Get our inscriptions back. Sure, we're ready now. Thanks.
Okay. So if it's not too crowded, does that mean we're not strictly limited to the 3-minute whole deal anymore? Or you want to keep it to 3?
We'll be interested to make sure we get your comments.
All right, I'll try and keep it brief. I do have written testimony, and for the benefit of the audience, anyone who's interested, I have copies of this. My name is John Charles, president of Cascade Policy Institute here in Portland, and a longtime transit rider and observer. My comments are as following. I think TriMet has both a short-term and a long-term problem related to service cuts. And I'll briefly address the proposed reductions and then offer some suggestions for how to address more systemic problems. With regard to the subject at hand here, the way the input is being sought is limited by the fact that it's a zero-sum game. I can argue to save my 5 favorite lines, but that's not very helpful if someone else argues the exact opposite. At the end of the day, TriMet still has to cut $27 million. Of course, find a way to cut service equal to $27 million. So therefore, I'll offer sort of the following conceptual comments. First is the agency should reward productivity. TriMet should encourage each line to the extent possible to, quote, earn its own keep by rewarding high-performing lines with more resources and lower-performing lines with less or no resources. Now, as a general matter, buses are increasing productivity compared to light rail, as seen by TriMet's monthly reports going back to 1987, indicating that from 1987, MAX has declined in boarding rides per vehicle hour by 0.5%, and from 1997 has declined by 15%, whereas bus has increased productivity by 17% from 1987. So since bus efficiency is improving, and buses move 2/3 of all riders on a typical weekday, TriMet should focus relatively more of the service cuts on the rail side. The one exception will be the blue line, which has averaged considerably more boarding rides per vehicle hour recently than 20 years ago. However, the yellow line is a notable underperformer, and the green line is, at least the I-5 portion of it, I-205 portion, is probably, at least anecdotally, a low performer. And those would be good candidates, therefore, for service cuts. Within the bus world, the 16 so-called frequent service lines carry 58% of the bus trips, and therefore all-day 15-minute minimum headways should be restored on those lines because they are the big dogs of the system and they should be fed. However, there are at least 30 bus routes that might be considered relatively low performing, and most of those routes should probably be cut back or eliminated outright, with service on the higher performing routes preserved where possible. In my view, this would provide the greatest benefit for the most people in a zero-sum situation. My second point is to repeal the free rail zone, something I have said before, and in the December 5th, 2008 report published by Nelson Nygaard for TriMet regarding potential changes to what was then known as Fairless Square, TriMet estimated that giving away free transit cost the agency somewhere between $2.7 and $3.3 million per year. Now, it will be less since Fairless Square has been modified, but the agency is still losing revenue by refusing to charge for service in its strongest natural market, which is downtown. Well, the high-density part of Portland, I should say. That makes no business sense to me whatsoever. Since the air quality concerns that underlie the Fairless Square originally have long since been ameliorated, TriMet should simply repeal the policy for both bus and rail, since we're now in a budget-cutting mode. Those are really my only 2 practical suggestions for the issue at hand. But I think addressing the fundamental cost problems, the current revenue shortfall, to me, has to be seen as a systemic problem. Simply cutting service or raising income will not be sufficient. We know this because total revenue for TriMet has grown substantially in the past 5 years, and yet monthly service has actually dropped. In terms of vehicle miles, from July of 04 to January of 2010, vehicle miles of service dropped almost 10%. Revenue hours have dropped 8%. And yet during those years, operating and non-operating revenue for TriMet increased 23% in real inflation-adjusted terms. So if service is dropping, even as revenue is rising, clearly there are larger forces at work. And those forces are in the form of two cost drivers, fringe benefits and new rail projects. And I'll just briefly address those, and I'll submit the rest in writing. TriMet board is already aware that the agency's fringe benefits package is unsustainable. This has been widely known among insiders since 1994, and yet little has been done to correct this problem. The largest single factor is health and welfare benefits, which, according to the budget posted yesterday on the TriMet website, now, at least for the full-time union employees, are up 80% since FY03, up 91% for the part-time union employees. These trends cannot continue. Overall, the total cost of all fringe benefits for FY11 equals 80% of payroll on a budget year basis, up from 65% last year, and the total cost is actually much higher due to other post-employment liabilities, which were, it was 115% of payroll last year, and according to the audit, the unfunded actuarial liability of OPEB alone was $632 million, or 484% of covered payroll. We have examined unfunded actuarial liability of OPEB for 86 Oregon public agencies. And TriMet's is the highest by far. The next closest is the Medford School District, which has a liability of 115% of covered payroll. So, looking at the upcoming year, if the cost of fringe benefits for employees was, quote, only 60% of payroll instead of 80%, the cash savings would amount to about $28 million, obviating the whole exercise we're going through now. I did read the general policy statement adopted at the last TriMet board meeting regarding current union negotiations, and I believe it's inadequate. The board agreed that the cost of employee benefits, quote, should not grow faster than the growth of TriMet's underlying payroll tax revenue, but in my view, it's too late to worry about growth rates. Benefits have to be cut in real terms within the current contract negotiations. TriMet needs to pick an objective metric for benchmarking, such as percentage of payroll cost or some other metric, and then use it to cut money going forward. Not wages, but benefits. My second point is that rail capital projects are cannibalizing the TriMet General Fund. The common perception is that rail projects are mostly paid for with federal funds and other outside sources, but certainly TriMet management knows better than that. A few obvious examples of where general fund dollars were used for capital projects: the Red Line, $45 million, Milwaukee, $30 million, Yellow Line, $24 million, too many other examples. In addition, TriMet sells revenue bonds backed by payroll taxes to augment federal grants, and as a result, net long-term debt has gone up from $173 million in 2001 to $405 million in 2009. The next two light rail lines, Milwaukee and the Columbia River, will be among the most expensive light rail projects ever built in America. And when we're done, we'll spend over $2 billion for 11 more miles of track. The benefit-to-cost ratio is poor. Light rail is inherently a low-capacity, high-cost mode of travel. What TriMet should focus on is high-capacity, low-cost transit, which means rubber-tired vehicles traveling on the ubiquitous and already built road system. So my conclusion is that while some low-performing routes probably warrant elimination at this time, continued service cuts across the board will be counterproductive and a distraction from the heavy lifting that needs to take place to address systemic problems. The TriMet board should focus its effort on the following actions. 1, reduce or eliminate service in September on low-performing rail and bus lines. 2, repeal the free rail zone. 3, restore service on frequent service bus lines. But these cuts could be avoided if the board votes to 1, reduce the annual cost of employee fringe benefits to 60% of payroll. And 2, cancel future light rail and streetcar expansions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no other speakers at this time, so we'll return to break and reconvene if we have other speakers. Thank you.